Step into a world where folklore meets the supernatural, where legends come to life and mysterious tales unfold. Welcome to Memory Chronicles, where the past holds the key to unlocking the secrets of the present. Join us as we delve into the realms of myth and mystery, exploring the untold stories that linger in the shadows of history. Get ready to embark on a journey of discovery with us.
Hello, this is Memory. Oh, what's up? It's you again. Okay. I've heard a little bit about it. I could do my research and let the people know. I got it. Okay. I'm listening. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. This was your favorite legend. Oh, okay. Like every other legend. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm quiet. Okay, well, let me get on with the show. All right, thank you for calling in. Ghostly from the Friendly Past. I'll let the people know about this next folklore. Thank you. All right, bye. Welcome back, my friendlings, to the Memory Chronicles podcast. I am your host, author, and sister friend, Memory. I'm so excited for today's episode, as you all heard from my producer and co-host, the ghost from the Friendly Past. It is going to be a good one. Let's gather around the fire and let's get into this.
All right, welcome back to part 2. We are talking about part 2. Thank you all so much. And this is part 2, continuing on the story of the legend of the CIA's psychic spies. Part 2 on the legend of the CIA's psychic spies. So if y'all remember, in part 1 we covered what we could even consider maybe the cons allegedly per CIA. So now in part 2 we're going to unpack the alleged legend and successes of remote viewing. And for those of you that are new to the podcast, welcome. For those of you that have been downloading, subscribing, and following and participating with the podcast information, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Global audiences, shout out to you. And while we're saying global audiences, shout out to you, it just reminds me, I like to explain as much as I can as well, and if I forget sometimes, please forgive me. So because it's a learning experience to understand that podcasts do reach global audiences, right? So the CIA is a government branch, a government agency within the United States of America. It is the Central Intelligence Agency. Now what Google says may be different from what some people think they do, but we digress, because then they are the ones that coined the term conspiracy in 1945. So we won't delve into that, and I will hold my personal opinion. But as I go on with the podcast, I'm your host, Memory, and today we're taking a walk down memory lane. We're talking 1970s, 80s, and allegedly 90s, and did it ever go away? Only time will tell. So let's get into it. We're going to pull 2 psychics within that time period that we know on record that worked on this project. And the project is gone through so many different name changes. And we are calling it Project Stargate. It's now dubbed Project Stargate, which is about remote viewing. So if you have not tuned into part 1, I highly recommend you check out part 1. But if you're picking up this podcast from this chapter, part 2, remote viewing via Project Stargate. Remote viewing is been known as the ability for one to project their consciousness either to the past, present, and or future. The mechanism, or the fascination of remote viewing, rather, I should say, is the simple fact that it's been believed that anyone can remote view. Now, Puthoff and his associate, as we talked about in part 1, who started the research on remote viewing, and it became a little bit controversial because some of the parts it alluded that they were feeding people information. But to be fair, with remote viewing, and I guess in the circumstances of Project Stargate, as we are all learning now, and we learned in part 1, if you're working for the agency such as the CIA and your mission is to seek out the enemy and enemy lines, then I could understand being given coordinates, but then they ask of you to sketch out on paper and pen what it is that you see at the coordinates. That's the alleged remote viewing process. So if I gave you the coordinates of 20.3000 degrees south and 57.5833 degree east, then I would say to you, can you sketch that? What do you see? What is at that site? What is at that location? Try your ESP and look up those coordinates and let me know what you're seeing. Let's do that as a funzie. But that is pretty much remote viewing, right? So I've always thought it was really cool that this is an ability allegedly that everyone can do, hone in on their ESP, and you are trickled just enough information, but not too much information to unpack. So if I say to you, I give you coordinates for Southern California, specifically the town of Redlands, and I give you a park there, and I ask you, what do you see? You're still, I feel, giving me valid data if you say that you see a red box that's circular, you give the measurements, that looks hollow on the inside. That, I think, that's tangible data. That's some data, right? So this is going to be an exciting moment. Now, we talked about this in part 1. We talked about what we could consider the cons, and now we're going to talk about the pros as it pertains to remote viewing. And the people we're following in this part 2 is Ingo Swann and Pat Price, but this is specifically following Pat Price. Now, Ingo Swann and Pat Price, though, were psychics, so I guess a little psychic work and remote viewing does the operation justice. Okay, so the legend of the CIA psychic spies, we have Ingo Swann and we have Pat Price, but we're going to dive into Pat Price, and I'm excited about this one because we're going to take it all the way back to Zimbabwe. And guess who's from Zimbabwe? Guess who grew up hearing this legend, this folklore? Not about Pat Price, but for me it's like, wow, I'm having a revelation moment. I'm having an aha moment. So let's get into it. So Pat Price was one of the most notable and influential figures in the realm of remote viewing, particularly during his involvement with the Stargate Project. And those that are new, Stargate Project, allegedly air quotes, researchable, was a project funded by America's CIA. So a former California police officer, Price became involved with remote viewing experiments conducted by SRI International, a research institute that worked with the U.S. government in various parapsychological projects. Pause. What's so interesting about this, reading the CIA declassified documents, I mean, baby, they had the Navy, the Army, the branches, roots in the articles. Like, people were out here really trying to figure out about this mind war, is also what it's dubbed. So it was a really laborious but interesting dive. Look, when I was going through those documents, I felt like I was doing something wrong. I was like, nobody better knock on my door and be like, man, what's going on? I'm just saying, they declassified them. Okay, so these documents are found on CIA.gov. So we're getting to know, we talked about part 1, we're getting into part 2. So let's talk a little bit about Pat Price and the successes of remote viewing, right? So Pat Price was known for his remarkable accuracy in remote viewing sessions. His detailed and precise descriptions of distant locations and objects gained considerable attention and respect among researchers and intelligence officials involved in Project Stargate. Notable sessions. One famous task involved Price being asked to remotely view a Soviet military facility. He provided incredibly detailed sketches and descriptions of the site, many of which later corroborated by satellite imagery and other intelligence sources, enhancing the credibility of remote viewing in the eyes of the project's sponsors. Another instance was his accurate description of the NSA facility in West Virginia, which he had never visited. His information accurately described the layout, specific details of the site. Due to his perceived successes, Price's work significantly impacted the U.S. government's interest in and funding for remote viewing research. His contributions were instrumental in securing continued support for Project Stargate. So I'm going to also continue to play some more of his successes, and then we're going to come back and unpack the ones that really, like, most of these were very intriguing, but we're going to come back and talk about the two big kahunas. So for now, you realize that Pat Price is an important, to me, government asset. Like, bro, what's going on enemy territory? Like, take a glimpse, let us know. So we're going to continue to talk about it. And that's why when we did part 1, I was really also taken aback with all that information on how the discrediting and the wishy-washy. But remember, that was like the science community versus CIA project, So let's get into it. Let's come back. Let's listen to some more of the information here as it's based with Pat Price's correct assessment during remote viewing.
Correctly located the code rooms in both cases. In this case, Price was asked to visit 2 foreign embassies using his remote viewing capability, locate the code rooms, and provide information that could help determine if he would be of operational use in subsequent operations. He was given operationally acceptable data, such as exterior photographs and geographical coordinates of the embassies, produced accurate and specific data, such as the location of interior doors and colors of marble stairs and fireplaces. In this case, they asked Price to visit 2 foreign embassies using his remote viewing capability, locate the code rooms, and provide information that could help determine if he would be of operational use in subsequent operations. Described a related underwater sabotage training facility site several hundred kilometers away on the seacoast. In this case, they asked Pat Price to provide information concerning the interior workings of the underwater sabotage training facility site several hundred kilometers away on the seacoast. Produced a map-like drawing of a guerrilla training site complex. In this case, they asked him to provide information on what was going on inside those buildings, the plans, intentions, etc. The excerpts from today's show have been taken from the CIA declassified documents titled Studies in Intelligence of Parapsychology in Intelligence from CIA.org, and these questions were asked by the sponsor, Ken Kress, who worked for the CIA.
So we furthermore find out about Pat Price's successes during remote viewing. So now let's continue to talk about the big kahunas, maneuvers. I make them. No, I'm just kidding. Now let's talk about one of the most exhilarating moments. So throughout Pat Price's renowned work for remote viewing, particularly during his tenure with the CRI International and the various projects that eventually culminated into Project Stargate, these two are my, who's who. So, notable in history, allegedly, according to legend, Pat was chilling. He was in his remote view vibes. And all of a sudden, he's sketching out stuff. Boom, boom, boom on his sketch pad. And the first sketching is in Mount Hayes in Alaska. And then the next one is in where? in Mount Inyangani in Zimbabwe. So as Pat sketched away, as he projected his consciousness, remote viewing, his first sketches of Mount Hayes, Alaska, talked about what he saw as he sketched underneath this mountain. This is back in the day with no internet, television, or influences to where he could say, oh, I saw an alien with big beanie eyes and, a weird shaped head. So he's sketching all of this stuff on his sketch pad, and it's also not making sense to him, but he has projected his consciousness, and it has taken him to this Mount Hayes in Alaska, this mountain. So there it is. In today's time, we now perceive it as him looking into this mountain and noticing an underground alien base. So one day, Pat comes to work to do what he does, get his sketch pad, get into his psychic vibes, get into his remote viewing vibes. He's under this CIA project, working for different branches of the government, including the armed services. So we are understanding more and more about Pat Price and his renowned work of remote viewing, particularly during his tenure with the CRI International, and also the various projects that eventually culminated in the Project Stargate. But among all his successes, there is two notable targets that he remotely viewed that particularly drew my interest, and I wanted to share them with you. Everything has been substantial and very exciting, but until this moment, Pat Hayes was minding his business, doing what he had to do with this sketch pad. This is pre-internet, pre-social media, pre any influences of understanding aliens, spacecrafts, etc. This is also a time period where people are not really open and talking about aliens or how they look, etc., etc., right? That's my new favorite word, etc., etc. So while he's over there doing what he has to do, sponsors asking him to cast and project his consciousness out there. So as his consciousness travels out there, boom, it lands in Alaska, Mount Hayes. As he is sketching and doing what he's doing, he stumbles upon, he's just drawing. Now he's just drawing, the drawings are surprising, the sketches are surprising him too, because there's no other words to really articulate most of the things he's drawing, but this is where his consciousness has taken him to remote view. Underneath Mount Hayes, he is sketching what appears to be an underground alien base. Upon further interrogation by his sponsor, he claims that this site, Mount Hayes, underneath it has it's an underground extraterrestrial base. Now, according to Price, he claims that the base was inhabited by alien entities who were monitoring and manipulating human activities. Now, what's interesting, taking into consideration in this time period, you're talking 70s, 80s time period. He describes advanced technology and machinery within the supposed base, including devices that could interfere with human thought, processes, and communication. Even upon further investigation from his sponsor, he's unable to completely articulate this type of technology, because hence, in this time period, it's not available, and I don't even think it's available to us right now. But he's doing his best to describe this, what he is seeing underneath Mount Hayes. Now, furthermore, upon the interrogation via his sponsor, Price's reports suggested that these alien entities had the capability to defend their base and were very secretive, using sophisticated methods to cloak their activities and presence from humans. Another fascinating find, just after Mount Hayes, he's sketching off again, minding his remote viewing psychic business. His consciousness is cast, projected to Mount Inyangani in Zimbabwe. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit something about Inyanga. We call it Inyanga. I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. Inyanga, where this mountain is. And I will tell you from our folklore. Then we'll go on to talk about Pat Price's discovery. So growing up in Zimbabwe, Inyangani, Mount Inyanga, whatever way you want to say it, but I knew it as Inyanga. I grew up knowing and understanding in our culture what we called it a sacred place. We called it the mountain where people disappeared. That was word on the curb, the street, the village, the whatever. So it wasn't a place that I know within our family structure was one where we would run to go vacation. Now, mind you, it's not in the city center. It's not in a big bustling town area. It's isolated out there in the middle of nowhere. But there are resorts around Mount Inyangani or Inyanga. Now, I tell you one thing. In grade 7, in primary school, we had to go off to camp. This was known as Camp Jeff Cox. I guess this is the man that owned the camping grounds. Don't ask me. I don't know. I was like freaking 12 or something like that. But anyway, so we're setting off into this bus, and it's a field trip. But we're about to be there. It's a field trip, but it was a long time. I cannot remember how long. If it was 1 week, 2 weeks, but we packed the bags and went. But here's the kicker. We were in Inyanga, yo. We were by Mount Inyangani, and I know my fear and panic was set. We were all just like freaking talking about it. But the whole plan was like, we're going to stay on base. We're going to stay in the camp. We're not going to go on, into the mountain, because we had heard ever since growing up that people disappeared, like the mountain swallowed people. So here it is. So we out here at Camp Jeff Cox doing the Camp Jeff Cox activities. It was interesting. It was fun. Now that I think about it, but thankfully, it was a sign-up sheet for people that wanted to go on the trail. Now, mind you, they were not going to go within the entire, climb the mountain, but around it. I was like, nah, I'm good. No thanks. Because this mountain, not only did we grow up hearing that it was sacred and that it swallows people and that people disappear, we grew up hearing that if you're walking within this mountain itself, if you look at something and point at it and talk about it, you would disappear. So the consensus was that if you were to ever find yourself in Inyanga on the mountain, you would not say anything. You would not point. You would not talk about whatever it is you're seeing. And what people had said was that even if you see mystical creatures, which was something people said, because they say that they dwelled among that mountain. If you saw mystical creatures, don't act surprised, don't act shocked. Just keep your eyes down and keep walking if you ever found yourself on that mountain. So it was so much like mystery, folklore, etc. that happened. And then one of the things with a lot of places growing up, I always grew up hearing about how sacred places were. And the other thing, we heard about the people that disappeared, that were swallowed by the mountain, that were never found. And so what local people would say and local legend would say is that these people didn't pay homage to the people that own and run the grounds, because rightfully so, in most of the isolated areas, they are village chiefs, and according to lore, you can't just go exploring. You have to seek out the chief for that area, and you have to pay homage in the form of money, gifts, etc., etc., so that they could give you the right of passage. Now, this is what I grew up hearing. Now that I'm finding out about Pat Price, I don't know. So, the older I grew, because Mount Nyangani has always been an interest for me as a Zimbabwean. Just because of the disappearances. Yeah, granted, it's a tall mountain. And the older I grew, I wondered, well, is it possible? Because people go hiking and you lose your bearings and you die and animals eat at your corpse. But some say even rescuers have attempted to go. And there are no bodies found. There are no skeleton remains found. I don't know. But this is just old folklore, legend, which was always part of who we are as a people. So this part of it is really interesting. So let's get into it. That's a little backstory on my experiences with Nyanga and Mountain Nyangani, honey. I don't care what anybody says. I am still not going. Like, you couldn't pay me $1 million today to say, let's get into it. Because it's just like, no. Like, why would we do that? Like, no. The goblins are going to get us. Like, duh. But and it's a lot of places like that I refuse, because you grow up as folklore. And it's interesting. It's a cave that's known to, air quotes, have mermaids. Like, also you would know Zimbabwe and Zimbabwean people are like so big on mermaids. For reals. But it's also that whole thing. Hey, listen, I grew up going to visit our grandmothers in the village. Where do we go take a bath? By the river. So it was so embedded in us that do not go into the water. Stay far away from the bank. Scrub up away from the bank. Use the water, but pay attention. When the water starts to whirlpool, you want to run because the mermaids are going to surface and take you. And that part of life has always fascinated me. It has. Because it's a whole big thing again. Like, if you're a child, you get taken by the mermaids. These rituals that have to happen. Your family cannot mourn your disappearance so that the mermaids could return you. And in my mind, I'm like, are people like moving through like portals and dimensions and what's going on? Because the interesting part of it, honestly, even though it could be folklore, is people that allegedly have been returned. And then they used to tell us, like, if you are taken by mermaids into the water, your family cannot mourn you. They have to do these rituals to keep you alive down there. And then if you are returned among your people, you will become the most powerfulest. Is that a word? But it's a word now. You become the most powerful witch doctor on the planet. I don't know, because I made sure I didn't go. Well, you know what I mean? I like, look, now you wonder why I only swim in clear water in the swimming pool. No thank you to the rivers and the dirty waters. No, ma'am. Let's get into Pat Price. So we found out that while Pat Price was remote viewing, projecting his consciousness, not only was he doing sketches based on Mount Hayes, and you're taking into consideration the time the time frame. It's not 2024. This is the 70s, the 80s. Like, what are you talking about, bro? Like, aliens, for real? Be for real. So not only did he sketch about Mount Hayes, but he sketched about Mount Nyangani and the ancient structures and alien presence. Pat Price reported that Mount Nyangani, like Mount Hayes, also housed an extraterrestrial base. He described this site as having ancient structures that were not human-made, but were instead constructed by these alien entities, more so interdimensional beings. Price suggested that the beings at the site had the ability to move between dimensions, making their base challenging to detect with conventional means. He also claimed that the presence of these beings at Mount Nyangani had a noticeable impact on the local environment and wildlife. Although the specific nature of these effects was not well documented. All I know is we had to stay away. You couldn't get up there. But people did, and they disappeared, and they were swallowed by the mountain. That's what I grew up hearing. So, despite the intriguing nature of Pat Price's discoveries, Pat Price reportedly used a combination of psychic techniques and a keen intuitive sense to draw and describe his targets. His approach and documented results were instrumental in developing protocols for remote viewing that were adopted and refined by subsequent practitioners. Despite the eventual termination of Project Stargate in 1995, Pat Price's work remains a significant part of the remote viewing narrative. He is often referenced in discussions about the potential and limitations of psychic phenomena in intelligence operations. While remote viewing remains a controversial and largely debunked field within the scientific community, figures like Pat Price played crucial roles in its development and in the intrigue it generated within both public and governmental circles.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Memory Chronicles podcast. Spread the word by sharing your favorite 30 to 60 second clips on your social media. It helps us connect with like-minded listeners like you. We're dropping new episodes every Monday at 6 a.m. Central Time, so set your alarms. Want to support the show? Hit our link tree in the description and buy us a coffee. Every bit helps. Interested in being a guest or curious about Memory's latest book projects? The link tree has all the info you need. Catch us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, our Memory Chronicles. Join our growing community by following, subscribing, liking, and sharing our content. From all of us here, and from Memory, thank you for your time and support. Stay safe, and see you next time.